All right, so this next panel is going to focus on mental health, very important. We're thrilled to have Doug Brackmann, PhD, and Dr. Brian Hooper share with us in session 3 on the importance of mental health. EO board member Robert Hartline will lead us in this lively and important discussion that will impact your future self. So first, Doug Brackmann. Dr. Douglas Brackmann, PhD, and author of Driven, Understanding and Harnessing the Genetic Gifts Shared by Entrepreneurs, Navy SEALs, Pro Athletes, and maybe you, is a psychologist specializing in helping highly driven individuals take back control of their lives. While studying psychology as an undergraduate at the University of Southern California, he started working in a rehabilitation facility treating addiction, anxiety, and depression. At only 19 years old, he realized that before he could help others, he had to first address his own difficulties. Throughout his self-realization journey, he developed a simple set of teachings that he continues to share with clients. These teachings are centered on the idea that we are all on a journey to discover a way to decrease our own personal suffering and to increase our heartfelt experiences of contentment, happiness, and connection to others. His passion for psychology drove him to earn a master's degree in science as well as a PhD in both clinical psychology and organizational business psychology at the California School of Professional Psychology. Throughout his studies and career, he developed an expertise in the application of mindfulness, self-psychology theory, and neuroscience. His knowledge on these subjects has successfully helped thousands of high-performing and driven clients, such as CEOs, entrepreneurs, athletes, and other top performers, find ease from anxiety disorders and addictions of all sorts.
And we have Dr. Brian Hooper. Dr. Hooper is a state of Tennessee licensed clinical pastoral therapist, integrating the wisdom of spirituality and the insights of clinical and counseling psychology to ameliorate suffering and maximize wholeness and well-being. He received a 4-year Master of Divinity degree from Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, Missouri, and a Doctor of Psychology degree from California Coast University in Santa Ana, California. He has served in full-time parish ministry and as a campus pastor for the Lutheran community at the University of California, San Diego, before starting his private practice in Nashville in 2011. He loves continuing education, fitness, cooking, the arts, and spirited conversation with cherished friends. Thank you all for being here.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Hutch and Max, for playing that song for me. It is a perfect song for this audience. Greatest American Hero, who remembers this? I'm going to take a moment, but besides this being my favorite theme song, it's also an interesting story of entrepreneurship. Because if you remember the story, it's a teacher named Ralph who goes to this derelict school and has these crazy kids. He takes them out to the desert to get them out of their school, getting out of their environment, and an alien comes and gives him a cape, right? This super heroic cape. And guess what? He's driving out of the desert and he loses the manual. He don't know how to use it. Like, he's crashing into buildings. And that's a perfect opening for what we're talking about today, because the Driven has this super heroic ability, but we also have these things that keep us from being our best, and that's what we are here to talk about today. So thank you, both of you, for joining me on this adventure of discovery of me and them and you, because often people that get into your field are suffering, right? Was that what led you to your practice?
Is this on? Yes, it is. It has, yeah. So anyone tells you they didn't get into psychology to figure out their own shit is lying. Truly, I mean, that's what we're doing there, and desperately trying to find out that we're not broken, which led me to, I heard it a couple times already today, it is a phenomenal time to be alive, because science, spirituality, neurobiology, all of these things are coming together in a way that allows us to actually really embrace how different we all are, but find those similarities that actually can really improve your life. So it's, but yeah, I got into psychology to figure out my own shit.
Brian?
Well, I had to decide when I was in college if I was going to go into pastoral ministry or clinical psychology. And I really felt a draw into pastoral ministry. And I thought, well, then I can always go back and study psych later. And that's what I did. But in both cases, it's the desire to realize what it means to be the fullest version of myself that I can be, the most authentic version of myself, and then to assist other people to do the same thing. So different approaches to the same thing, and I'm privileged because I get to integrate the two fields together.
When you're thinking of like a driven person, a CEO or a leader, what makes them different than a typical patient? What sets them apart?
That's yours, for sure.
Yeah. How many people have read Driven? Oh, not bad. So I got into psychology to figure out my own shit. I'm a high school dropout, was living in a car at 17, but had this profound awareness that I was not as screwed up. I'm trying to not use the F-bomb. As screwed up as everyone around me thought I was. Although my behavior was pretty nuts. You know, I discovered the wonderful mixture of liquid ether with cocaine. It's called freebasing. And within 4 months, I could not stop. It was truly an addiction. And anyone here who's ever had an addiction, it's who's in control of me? And you're like, what the hell? I can't stop. No matter what my monkey mind is telling me, no matter what I'm watching myself do, there seems to be something else driving my behavior, which led to my doctoral dissertation, which looked at self-sabotage, looked at why does January suck at the gym? And what happens by April, it's 87% of people do not remember their New Year's resolutions. And so what the hell happens? We have such good intention, but then there seems to be something that resists it. And so that capacity to understand myself, like what the hell is going on with me, led to a perfect time in psychology. In 1987, a Time magazine article came out that said, we found it. We found the alcoholism gene. And I was at USC, an undergrad, loving psychology, but it was 1987. I was having someone else type my papers. I was handwriting them and typing them. Having somebody else type, I couldn't type. I had a pen. I remember when Pentium computers came out in 91 when I entered grad school. I remember in 92 when we got our pagers. So this time way back in the day, we believed that nature versus nurture had this big split in it. It's just your genetics. You're set in that. In the intervening 30 years now, and I heard it 3 or 4 times today, that is it nature versus nurture? The answer is yes. You cannot separate them anymore. And so within 5 years, 6 years of them finding, and that was the dopamine receptor, DR2, dopamine receptor number 2, DRD2, -A1 allele gene. And so there was this aberrant gene that caused all this. Within 5 years, it also correlated with eating disorders, gambling addictions, entrepreneurship, success, professional athletes. They're like, what the hell? And so the complexity of that, if you're in this room, you're not normal. I hate to break it to you. And I do this with my clients all the time. You want to go see normal? Go be a greeter at Walmart for a week. That's normal. And go look at the line of people in Disneyland. That's normal. If you're an entrepreneur, you are different. And in the last 5 years, since I wrote Driven, the functional MRI, because there's a ton of money in ADHD and ADD meds, there's a lot of good research in it, fortunate for me. But it's the Western medical model is a disease-based model. They're looking for something wrong to fix. It's a symptom-based model. So is psychology. And it was driving me insane as a different, neurodiverse person, as if you're in this room, you do have neurodiversity, you are different. And that pathologizing of me, I was so sick of, and I heard both Leah and Aaron said it too. They had to go out on their own but what we are is different. So I wrote Driven, and what Driven is a normalization of basically a trauma-based personality type. We are designed to live in a trauma-filled, high-stressed world. And 4,000 years ago, most of the human species adapted to the agricultural revolution. And despite how it feels, the world has never been a safer place than it is today, ever. And meaning that the chances of you dying from war or disease or anything, childbirth, any of those things, going down. But what's happening is the world is getting more and more anxious. And by luck, my doctoral dissertation chair, nut of a guy, great guy, his roommate at Berkeley was a guy named Peter Levine. I don't know how many people have heard of Peter Levine. And so in 91, I walked into Peter Levine's world. And this understanding of the difference between the two different operating systems that are driving most behavior is exponentially better now, 30 years later. Why? Because of the functional MRI, we can really see, who's in control of us. But I use a metaphor in my book, and I wanted to share that because it'll make a lot more sense of how we work. The metaphor is very simple, and if you go to the gym, January, the Buddha observed very obviously that people are being controlled by two different systems. You have a system up here, and this is the neocortex, and that neocortex, he called it the monkey mind. It can imagine cell phones and imagine six-pack abs, imagine your health, imagine your finance, romance, whatever category you pick, in just a beautiful way. But there's another operating system down below your nose that is working very differently and different and in one major facet. This thing down below your nose is a real-time operating machine, where this thing above your nose, this neocortex, is a time machine. And so most people's central nervous system, this thing down below their nose, is actually being driven by their thoughts, not by reality. And so the Buddha observed very much that we're like an Indian elephant down here with a whole bunch of monkeys up on top trying to control it. And what happens? The monkey mind comes up with great ideas. You leave something like this, and oh my God, I'm going to biohack the crap out of myself, and I'm going to do all this stuff, and I'm going to get six-pack abs. You can imagine that, you can envision it, but what happens is the elephant starts to resist, and the couch gets sticky somewhere in February, and all of a sudden, it's like, who's in control of me? Is it my monkey mind, or is it the elephant? And the Buddha, and this is really how I operate as a psychologist, it comes down to identity. So very simply, answer to yourself in your own head, where are you? Where is this identity piece? Are you the monkey mind, or are you the elephant? And it's a trick question, and I love the look on everybody's face when I ask this question, because it is very simply both and, capital A-N-D, double underlined, neither. And so it's that third element that people have been trying to figure out for 50,000 years. And it's, we have the brain up here, we have the body down here, and then we have this third thing. Freud called it the observing ego, Jung called it the big S self, you call it your soul, mind, body, soul. But that ability to actually step out of your experience and look in is where all change comes from. And I heard it also a couple times today. It is the difference between these two systems is really, this thing can imagine amazing worlds. This thing wants a familiar world. And that's the big crux in where everybody's monkey mind is battling the elephant, which the Buddha called suffering or dukkha. And that contrast, between these two operating systems is what all psychology is about. And so trauma gets stuck in the body. The hippies were right. And so that third element, if you take anything away from me today, that's the real you. Watching this, and I heard it a couple of times too, if you don't learn to listen to your body, you will. It's just a matter of time. And so, this ability, and with Robert, the breath work and you exhale all the air out, and you're in that. Your elephant will start to scream signals up to the monkey mind, you're gonna die. But it's your soul or this third thing that actually, no, you're not. This is the one that actually can be the one who can reality check. Other thing I heard you can take away from me, you cannot make big changes in your life. Impossible. You win the lottery, what happens? 87% of lottery winners within 3 to 5 years, broke, family hates them, and they're bankrupt. Why? Because the elephant can't handle it. And so you make a small change and you keep it. Make a small change and you keep it. The other thing that I heard, and just wanted to get it in, the last thing, and then I'll shut up. Learn to listen to your body. And that's breath work, that's meditation, mindfulness, and this is the third time in the 30 years I've been a psychologist that the big mindful wave is coming through. I was there when John Kabat-Zinn, beginning of it. And why does it fade away? Because it's hard. It's work. And so this capacity to actually learn to listen to your body. And, medical science, psychology, all of it is based on groups. Meaning that we're looking at this group of people compared to this group of people, and these groups of genetics compared to this group of genetics. It says nothing about you. And so one of the stints that I did in early 90s, pre-protease inhibitors, I worked at, Ryan White had a huge funding for HIV. And they were using these beautiful men just as guinea pigs to figure out, and my advice to all of them was become your own doctor. And you can know more about your body than anybody else on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Amazing.
Very good.
I'm going to say it a little bit more humbly, but one of the first things that, the most important thing I learned when I trained in hypnotherapy was that we move in the direction of our most dominant thought. And that has underlay everything that I do with guided meditation, which is just one tool that we have in our toolbox to use. And the other day I walked into the break room where I have my office, and somebody had written down on the whiteboard, what are your key words for this year? So I saw words like compassion and leadership and encouragement, all great words. And I looked at what I had been thinking about from before the beginning of the year, and so I wrote down the word audit, because I'm auditing my thoughts, I'm auditing my actions. We have to be aware we move in the direction of our most dominant thought. If we believe something's possible, and we behave in that direction consistently, we will become that. Believe, behave, become. But we have to live with that awareness. And you talked about the third person, so to speak, in the Trinity of ourselves, the ability to self-reflect. And that is really at the heart of spirituality. And that's where spirituality and psychology come together. Spirituality is about being in relationship with our most authentic selves, to really be honest to God with ourselves, and then to live in the reality of this world, to know what's going on in me, between me and you, and around me in the world, to be awake to it, to be authentic, to be awake, and then to live out of our deepest values with every single decision that we make. So whatever it takes for you all every day to be awake. By the way, what is the Buddha? The answer is the Buddha is awake, right? If you want to be spiritual, don't go to the heavens. Don't go there first. Go in here and be honest with yourself, because the ground of being wants relationship with that internal, honest to God self. And then the sky's the limit.
This is great. It leads me to a couple of questions that I heard from the audience. One question was, if my business wasn't here, I wouldn't have this anxiety. And kind of what I've learned over the years, that you take one away and someone else appears. So what do you guys say for that?
I can speak to that. So the trauma-based personality type. So the general theory, hunter-farmer theory, been around a long time, but 4,000 years ago, most of the human species adapted to the agricultural revolution. And what is agriculture? That's farming. That's predictable, safe, non-risky, linear way of going through life. And as we went from little hunter-gatherer groups of drivens, just like us, into these massive societies, the brain and the biology adapted. And Leah was talking about allostasis, which is my client base. We are all, if you're in this room, there's a really good chance you're in allostasis. But that's the elephant. And so if you think about farmers and what they like boring worlds. They like 3% growth. They like W-2 jobs. As I often joke with all my clients, I am unemployable. I truly am. I work well with others. I do not work for others. And that ability, and actually a lot of head shakes, it's like, oh shit. But, not being normal, and that dopamine receptor site, number 2, which is the boredom gene. And I minimalize it and simplify it. You go, if any genetic freaks in here, like genetic research geeks like I am, there's now 143 on SNPpedia different allele genes associated just with boredom. So it is incredibly complex. So do I have this, and if I have it, is there anything to do about it? Yes, there's a lot you can do about it. There's a lot of stuff now about managing your dopamine system. If you're in this room, that will completely change your life. Because we are wired for chaos. We are wired for a dangerous, scary world. One of my favorite researchers, a guy, Tom Hartman, who first coined this, way back, he called it, he looked at groups of bacteria. You have 1,000 of the same bacteria. There's usually 3, 4, 5% that are wired for a rapidly changing environment. We, if you're in this room, if you're driven, we're waiting for the next ice age. We're the ones who are, looking at the human herd, and they're the ones who are going to go, oh shit, and die. We're like, we'll figure it out. And, if you're like me, it'd be kind of exciting. It'd be, bring it. But that difference in boredom, and where I go with all of this, and to answer the question directly, is identity. And, if you have this non-driven brain, a non-neurodivergent brain, you have this nice ball of energy in the left prefrontal light up, and it's a logical, rational, linear way of understanding yourself. You're a butcher, you're a baker, you're a candlestick maker. I mean, it's a very simple identity. Combine that with the Western medicine model of if you're not normal, you're broken. We walk into a normal, non-driven psychologist's office, or God forbid, doctor's office. They look at us like we are batshit crazy, because we are compared to them. But the real thing that gets people in my world is that identity, meaning that this most consistent thing in my life is this feeling that I'm not enough, this feeling that there's something missing or wrong, this feeling, and that's dopamine, this feeling that's the real me. And that's why I wound up with 2 PhDs trying to get rid of this feeling that I'm not enough. It didn't work, because it's just a feeling, it's not me. And so that shift in that, in understanding into this observing, way of being in the world, and then taking, as Robert said, you got to take responsibility for your life. And this is your ride through. This is it. And getting to the point, and I always laugh, where you can genuinely ask yourself, without all the judgment, without all the emotional crap attached, what am I doing? And, what am I doing finance-wise? What am I doing romance-wise? What am I doing health-wise? Knowing there's going to be resistance to looking at your, checking account to know if you're going to make payroll this week. It's like, oh, I don't want to look. Which one is that? Well, that's the elephant. and being able to discern those three, because you want to go to the doctor and find out if you're sick. You want to go. It's natural to resist it. But that identity piece around there's nothing wrong with you. If you felt like there's something wrong with you your whole life, it's a feeling. It's not you. It's a gift and a curse. But
Brian, what would you suggest to help with the question of anxiety? Because there was another question in here about which is better, alcohol or weed? Well, let's go back to the why did you choose the alcohol, right?
So let's take addictions for an example. I am convinced experientially in the work that I do that all addictions are attempts to get legitimate needs met in ways that are not helpful, that are not whole-making. And what I have observed is that people are looking for a different internal state, a different internal experience. So taking something from the outside will meet that need in the short term, but it always has side effects to it. So I'm not against alcohol. I enjoy a really good glass of wine with a really good meal with friends and great conversation. But I can't rely on that to bring me into relationship with myself, which is where the anxiety lies. It's in relationship with myself. So I have to learn how to be with me. And that's why more and more therapists are talking about empathy for the self, compassion for the self, understanding for the self and what we've been through. When I work with adults, I had this and I'll never give you enough information you would know who I was talking about. But I'll give you an example. I was working with a gentleman who came, I was called to his home to see him as a therapist. He was going through home detox. And got to know him that way. We've been together now for, I think, going on 3 years. And he's now clean and sober. He's been clean and sober for 2 years, which is great. But about a year ago, he said, I wake up in the morning and he said, I don't pace like I used to, but I just have this anxiety that ripples over my body, and then it dissipates fairly quickly. It's not like it used to be, but it's still there. And he said, everything's going great in my life. My love relationship is great. My relationship with my children's great. My professional life is great. I don't know what this is about. And I said to him, have you ever felt this feeling before, this anticipatory kind of dread, like the next shoe is about to drop? He said, oh yeah, felt that all the time when I was growing up. I said, were promises made and never kept? Oh yeah, my dad was an alcoholic. He made great promises, hardly ever kept them. I said, oh. So everything is looking really promising right now, isn't it? And he looked at me and he said, oh. He put it together, and from that day on, with that insight, he recognized where it came from. He's been practicing mindfulness breathing, right? Because he's been working on developing a relationship with himself that is what? Kind, compassionate.
How many in here feel that their form experience is group therapy? So what tools could a form embrace in a form scenario that would be mimicking a positive outcome of group therapy?
yeah, group therapy is incredibly powerful. It's easier to see your crap in other people than it is in yourself. But if the crap that you're looking at is driving you nuts, it really applies to you. It's about your own.
If you spot it, you got it.
Lots of forums. The difference between drivens and farmers or non-drivens, you have a herd of gazelles, which most of the human population is wired for a herd. And what does a herd do when a cheetah runs into it? They scatter, and you're on your own. And we all have that wiring. You're on the freeway, 8 people all going 90, and cop gets on and picks somebody else. Aha, they got you, not me. And so we feel that relief. We feel that sense of increased safety when somebody else gets it and we don't. But if you're driven like I am, and I was working in the SEAL teams for years and years and years, we're pack animals. We are wired like a wolf pack. And if you've ever picked the wrong business partner and they screwed you, that is because we have this ridiculously high sense that we really want somebody to have our back. And what happens when a bear attacks one of the wolves in a wolf pack? Wow, they all jump on the bear. And so that is what we're really craving. And as Brian was saying, most of us didn't have it in our childhoods. And is it nature versus nurture? If these are transgenerational trauma genetics that get turned on in us, and well, I had a great childhood, yeah, but 4 years, 4 generations back, it was total chaos. And following up on that earlier, this thing can imagine the peaceful Sunday afternoon. This thing can't tolerate it. And that ability to have discernment, because this will tell you, oh, there's snakes everywhere. And if you're, like I always say, feelings are bullshit. They're not real. They're neuropeptide reactions you're having in your body. They're not facts. Feelings are not facts. But they're the most important things in the world because they literally change your perception of reality. If you're living in fear all the time, all you see is snakes. Worse is the, entrepreneur comes in, has got the greatest idea that's going to change the world, and they're lost in their narcissistic fantasy about how great it is. They're not seeing all the snakes. So that's where insight and mindfulness and changing this relationship you have with your central nervous system has to happen.
Brian, what about form group therapy? What tools could we use to help us with a form experience that would best practice?
I think if and I have this with colleagues that in fact, there are 2 psychologists that I meet with every Friday for mutual supervision, we call it, where we share cases with each other. Would you care to guess how many meetings we actually talk about the cases we're working on and how much we talk about ourselves? And yeah, we do consult about cases, but the thing that I relish about this is that I can get on with them on Zoom and say, guys, I'm feeling as neurotic as hell today. And we can talk about my neurosis. We can talk about my anxiety that's coming up because something went sideways with a patient or something like, who knows, whatever it might be, or something else in my life and relationally speaking. So I think team up with people that you really trust and say, let's just talk about reality. Could I share something with you? I'd relish your wisdom on this. And that means we have to be somebody has to be vulnerable to start, right? But if we can do that, man, that is a gift you can't pay for.
I love it. We're opening up the floor for some questions, by the way. So if you have a question, you want to step up to the mic. To add to that, what we just said was the 5% in our form experience. Getting to the 5%. It's not an update to how life is going. It's how you are doing. That experience when one person opens and is vulnerable, it unlocks. As soon as someone leans in and they start to tear up, what happens to your focus and awareness? Right on that person. And you can really give them your presence. Presence is a conversation about what I've worked on and what you work with clients, how to get them to be away from their digital devices, as I have my phone on right now. I got my notes. But to be present without the phone. So how do you navigate and help someone remove that addiction to their phone?
There's some practical ways. I mean, we can set some parameters on our phones, as I understand it, to be able to help with that. But here's the thing: with any change, we have to actually decide it's important enough to change. If we're not really dedicated to making a change, then it's not going to happen.
I'll go deep real quick. My favorite name for God is presence. And so this relationship you have with the present moment, and if any Bible scholars in here, it's used throughout. There's 73, it depends on how you read it, 73 different names for God in that big book. God's not a thing, God's a relationship. And so if you have a relationship with the present, in the present moment, well, this is great. Where is safety? Oh, everybody's wants it. I'll have more money. I'll be safe when I finally get the money. I'll be safe. You are only safe in one place, and that is right here, right now. But you are safe. Burn this into your brain. Safety is not a feeling. Safety is a state of being. And so that ability to actually know that, that's your monkey mind, and then meet your central nervous system that is usually being run by this crazy multi-thinking thing we have above our heads, but actually become curious of, is my central nervous system actually accurate reflection of what's happening right now? That's called meditation. And so is this central nervous system connected to the here and now? And you see me looking around, anybody who's read my book, you put us in a functional MRI, our back of our heads slide up. The front of our heads are a mess. We're hypofrontal. We're all over the place. But how many people are here have tried meditation with their eyes closed and it makes them crazy? Because it makes us think like mad. And so this capacity to actually use your eyesight, which is the Driven's number one tool, for reality checking the central nervous system, and then you can feel that byproduct of presenting, which is relaxation. That's a byproduct of meditation. It is not the goal, it's not the purpose. The purpose of meditation is to be present. And so I think it is the core thing, but who's the one who reminds you to be present? That's your soul, that's the observer. So meditation is a soul strengthening or observer strengthening activity. And that the stronger this is, David Goggins can't hurt me while he's completely destroying his body. It's crazy. But he's talking about this guy up here. And that capacity to actually step out of your experience, ask yourself, what am I doing? Is your presenting awareness. And that's why meditation, if you don't get meditation, you're not alone as driven people. Like, what the fuck, I don't get it. Once you get it, and I teach meditation in a very interesting way, but I teach meditation at gunpoint. Once I do long-range shooting, I integrated long-range shooting with meditation. It's wild. We shoot out to a mile. But it's that capacity to actually feel that there is no resistance in the present. There isn't. And you're resisting looking at your checking account, or resisting pulling the trigger. You're not present. And so the more present you are, any anticipatory resistance or fear goes away. Good news is there, you can do anything. Bad news is there, you have no excuse to not do it. It's just a presenting practice, so it's core to it's everything to me.
When thinking of the word mental health, what does that really mean?
Three things for me. One, to know myself authentically. The shadow side, and by the way, there are a lot of good things that reside in the shadow. That's why it's important to explore it, as well as to know how we hang ourselves up. So to know the shadow side and the side as well that I'm comfortable that I present. That's the first part of mental health. The second is to be really oriented to the reality that I live in today, and not confuse biology with ideology, for instance. And the third thing then is to have a set of deep values out of which I live in an integrated kind of way. For me, those three things summarize what good mental health is. And if I've got that, I can deal with a down day. If I've got that in a relationship with myself, I can deal with my anxiety. If I've got that, I can deal with crises.
What kind of health-related habits have a profound impact on positive mental health?
Ooh. Diet, sleep, exercise. The number one thing that predicts mental health outcomes in every psych study. In fact, they have to norm those within the groups, or the groups become biased, and they can't tell the difference if meds are working or not. I'm not here to bash Big Pharma, but they have a different set of goals than you do. And you want to make sure of that, and if anything I can suggest, anything in here, find a driven doctor. You saw two of them earlier. They'll look at you and not think you're crazy.
Guys, thank you. If we could have a round of applause.